Sometimes the best way to plan for and counter enemy technology is by directly accessing it. Piloting enemy aircraft, driving enemy vehicles, and dismantling them can give one nation a significant upper hand over another. Yet accessing enemy technology can be incredibly challenging, unless it happens to fall from the sky intact. In 1988, something like that pretty much did occur though, when the French captured two Soviet-produced Mil Mi-25 Hind-D helicopters in Chad. Abandoned in the midst of conflict between Libya and Chad, the Libyan Air Force-operated helicopters offered a tantalizing target for the West. After negotiating with the government of Chad, the US launched a top-secret mission named Operation Mount Hope III, sending a Chinook helicopter to extract the Soviet rotorcraft in the dead of night. Conflict in the region can be traced back to the start of Muammar Gaddafi's claim that the Aouzou Strip in northern Chad belonged to Libya, a claim born from an unratified treaty from 1935 between Italy, which controlled Libya, and France, which controlled Chad. This geographic assertion had been presented as well during the reign of King Idris I, which resulted in an attempt to invade and occupy the Strip in 1954. In that instance, the French were able to halt Libyan aggression. This would not be the case once Gaddafi was in control of Libya and after Chad gained its independence in 1960. With the French no longer protecting Chad, and Chad facing the military and political unrest, the door of opportunity opened up for Libya. Gaddafi wanted access to more resources and, more importantly, land. The disputed Aouzou Strip is 114,000 square kilometers, or 70,836 square miles, north of Chad, which borders on Libya. Particularly valuable are the uranium and oil deposits in the area. By 1970, Gaddafi was funding the Frolenat, Front de Libération Nationale du Tchad, with help from East Germany and the USSR to cause discord within the rival nation. Collaboration, compounded with the Soviet desire to expand the USSR's sphere of influence, resulted in Libyan acquisition of Soviet Mil Mi-25s. Gaddafi continued to meddle in Chad with both direct attacks and support of rebel factions. In 1986, the different Chadian factions almost entirely stopped fighting each other and jointly turned their attention towards recovering territory controlled by Libya and showing an unprecedented level of unity. After 15 years of extended conflict, the United States and France assisted the now unified Chadian forces in ousting the invaders. In March of 1987, the Chadian armed forces of the north took over an Air Force base held by Libya at Wadi Doum with help from the US and France. Once April rolled in, the French gained more footing from Gaddafi's national forces and captured a Mil Mi-25 that soldiers had abandoned when they retreated after defeat at the hands of the Chadian army. Chad and France now had two captured Mil Mi-25s at Wadi Doum. The CIA had a deep interest in retrieving one of those two vehicles. The Department of State began a relatively long negotiation with Chad. The exact gains Chad made from granting the American request to take the rotorcraft are not clear. However, rumors suggest that at least $2 million and a batch of missiles were turned over to the African nation. Chad agreed to give the US the helicopter, but would not participate in its transportation, which would take place using a CH-47 Chinook. Rights to recover the other captured Mil Mi-25 were granted to the United Kingdom. The CH-47 is a tandem rotor transport helicopter designed by Boeing in 1957. It was developed as a replacement for the Sikorsky CH-37 Mojave, featuring a gas-powered turbine instead of a piston engine. The first few prototypes were considered too light for transportation and too heavy for attack missions. Upon improvements, the helicopter was introduced to the U.S. Marine Corps of what was then the CH-46 Sea Knight. In 1961, Boeing gave the Army a new, enlarged model. It was tested on September 21, 1961, and was subsequently ordered into production. Although the Chinook has seen modifications throughout its lifetime, the helicopter is typically equipped to carry cargo in the fuselage or to lift underslung loads by means of 3 external cargo hooks. When first adopted by the Army, the Chinook could travel at a speed of up to 170 knots, or 196 miles per hour, which made it faster than other utility and assault helicopters at the time. The first time the U.S. used them in conflict was during the Vietnam War, when it was used to place artillery batteries in otherwise inaccessible mountains. Yet, by some accounts, the mission to extract the Mil Mi-25 Hind-D marked the first time a Chinook was used by the Army in a major capacity. As the declassified top-secret report of the mission states, it was one of the, quote, regiment's earliest successes and the first major operation utilizing the mighty Chinooks. The United States had limited access to threatening technology held by hostile counterparts during the 1980s, and the opportunity to extract a Soviet Mil Mi-25 from Chad was not one it could pass on. As President Eisenhower did not want to appear partisan, he made no effort to have his country deliver the helicopter. Quite the opposite, the negotiation for Mount Hope III lasted months, far more than a conversation with an ally in a less compromised position would have been. Before negotiations were even settled, in March of 1988, the U.S. and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Group detailed instructions to practice using the CH-47 Chinook to transport weight equal to that of the Mil Mi-25, somewhere between 17,000 and 18,000 pounds, with the necessary fuel and considering the dry desert environment of the future mission. Testing took place in April of 1988, when 2 Chinooks were sent to Fort Campbell in New Mexico, aboard a C-5 Galaxy transport aircraft. The top-secret report, released via the Freedom of Information Act, describes the exercise, quote, "Unlike the actual mission, the rehearsal was conducted under the hours of darkness, departing at approximately 6 p.m. and flying a 490 nautical mile route to the target site. The first Chinook lifted the simulated target, 6 blivets filled with water, and then both Chinooks returned to the simulated forward support base, FSB, requiring 2 refueling stops. After successfully completing this test, the 160th SOAG conducted load testing with a similar airframe, equal in weight to the Hind, and rigged exactly as it would be fitted to the Hind. Again, the pilots accomplished their mission as they lifted the tandem load. After the success of the exercise proved that the Chinook could carry heavy weights for extended periods of time, the U.S. became increasingly confident in Operation Mount Hope III. Negotiations concluded, and the U.S. now had permission to take the Soviet helicopter from Chad into the U.S. On May 21st, they received the order, and a smaller survey team traveled to Germany and then Chad 2 weeks before the mission. Then the complete team and Chinook aircraft were taken directly to Chad from the continental United States. Once in Chad, the team decided that the extraction of the Soviet helicopter from Wadi Dum would need to happen at night, with the return happening over dawn to mitigate any risk of being attacked or confronted by Libyan forces. On June 11, 1988, at the stroke of midnight, the Chinook was flown 500 nautical miles to Wadi Dum in the north of Chad, with Libyan forces still present in the area. The declassified military report on the occasion reads, quote, "The flight arrived at Wadi Dum at approximately 5 a.m. The first Chalk landed close to the target and configured the Hind, while the second Chalk hovered over the Hind and sling-loaded it. Once the crew determined the load was stable, the flight departed Wadi Dum to return to N'Djamena. This flight differed from the rehearsal in that it was performed during daylight hours, but still proved to be successful en route to the planned refueling points at Faya Largo and Musoro, Chad. Departing from the latter location, the French Foreign Legion airfield, they began the most difficult leg of the entire mission. Approximately 45 minutes outside of N'Djamena, the flight encountered a 3,000-foot sandstorm. At times, the flight had to slow to 40 knots to maintain visibility with the ground and each other. Fortunately, just before reaching the airfield, the pilots cleared the sandstorm and raced to N'Djamena. They set the Hind down just seconds before the sandstorm overtook the airfield. After 22 minutes of being sandblasted at N'Djamena, the storm passed, and the crews were able to exit their aircraft, immediately preparing the Chinooks and the Hind for transport back to the U.S. within days. Thus, the mission ended as a major success for the United States military. The Soviet Mil Mi-25 Hind-D was a follow-up to the Mil Mi-24, special for its simultaneous multi-purpose. It functions as a large attack helicopter or gunship that can also transport up to 8 troops. As an infantry fighting vehicle, it can uniquely offer fire support while transporting infantry. It counts on 2 turboshaft engines and a 5-blade main rotor, alongside a 3-blade tail rotor. These are made of titanium and therefore highly resistant. As for protecting its cargo, the fuselage is armored to hold back impacts of 12.7mm rounds, while the cockpit's windscreens and titanium body can resist ballistic attacks. Furthermore, these parts of the helicopter are overpressurized to keep the crew safe in case of nuclear, biological, or chemical attacks. It's important to note that NATO member countries are thought to have no real rival counterpart to the Mil Mi-25 that can perform as both an armored attack helicopter and a transport helicopter, raising the importance of Operation Mount Hope III at the time. While some NATO helicopters can perform both tasks, it generally requires doing one at a time, with conversions from one type of rotorcraft to the other. The most similar Western helicopter was built by the United States in the 1970s, the Sikorsky S-67 Black Hawk, which, although being fast, agile, and capable of both attack and transport, was never pushed into production due to an unexpected accident during a demonstration in 1974. For many, the Mil Mi-25 or Hind-D has been the only deployed rotorcraft of its kind, a true assault helicopter. The success of Operation Mount Hope III allowed the U.S. Army to investigate its secrets and components up close.